right, so we're back. And we actually have our instrument. And it works. We have our KSP script. Imagine, yeah, we're selling now this amazing ADSR instrument. The user loads it. That's what the user sees. Some libraries, even encoded libraries, can lock this wrench. The user never goes inside. The user doesn't care about our KSP code, doesn't need to know anything about it. The user just needs it to work. Now, why am I saying all this? So the way we built our KSP script, there's no, it works. And what I'm basically trying to say is there's no necessarily a correct way or an incorrect way of building the KSP script as long as it works, as long as you're not doing something, I don't know, that is really like, I don't know, somehow causes like insane performance issues, and it's just because you scripted it wrong or whatever. But on a very basic level, yeah, it doesn't matter if you like the order of things or your internal logic of doing things. But what we did here, we had everything is very, very declarative, right? So if you notice, let's go one by one. So we have our attack slider, and then we have our decay and sustain and release slider, right? And okay, there is the moment where we individually we need to declare them, right? We declare 4 sliders, but after that, we're doing so many things that are basically the same line of code. So the same command, right? But targeting like just the different sliders. So, and even with the same values sometimes. So for example, for all the sliders, we're telling them that the picture should be knob. For all the sliders, we're telling them that the mouse behavior should be mouse behavior, which is minus 450. There are some differences like the automation IDs and the automation names, maybe in the value, but the command is again the same. And it goes on. And also if you look at our callbacks that we set up, they're also pretty much the same, right? So we have the same commands inside, right? Like everything is the same. Okay, but just like the things, like the parameters are different, but the commands are the same. And again, this is fine that we did it this way. The script is very, very readable. The advantage of doing this way is imagine you had like a huge, huge script and somewhere you had some mistake with some slider. I don't know. It's very, very easy to just look for all the instances of where the K label is, whatever, and find your mistake and fix it, right? Super simple. But the script is actually super long. So you can argue that this way it's the most readable, or you could argue that this way it's actually super not readable and just super unneedlessly long. Again, it's a matter of scaling, and it's a matter of how you want to set up it's not exactly the logic, it's kind of your paradigm and the workflow and the way the instrument is scripted. So TLDR, this is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it would just be to somehow try to loop through all these commands and have like one line that basically understands that there's different parameters here that need to be changed, but kind of like do it in a way that loops through everything and just does it automatically. So we're going to introduce a number of things in this video. We're going to introduce looping, and we're going to introduce functions. And yeah, let's just do all that. So we said we know that, okay, that this happens multiple times. So we need some way of kind of saying, okay, let's make it happen one time. Now, the first thing that we can notice is, the first thing that happens is basically we're not even targeting the attack slider value, right? We're targeting the UI ID. So this command, it's not necessarily worrying about like slider, because there's another command inside, right? Like it's dynamic in any case. The command is not, it's targeting the get UI ID result. So what if we do something like this? What if we, remember we know already how to declare integer arrays. So what if we declared our sliders, we make them persistent. Make persistent is one command that you cannot do this looping thing that I'm going to show with. It's a bit of a shame, but that's just how Kontakt works. But we're gonna, we're gonna start putting our things in loops. Okay, anyways. So first thing, we're going to declare an array, and we're gonna call it UI, or let's call it slider IDs. Slider ID. Just for our little array here. And we know we have 4 elements, so it's going to be an array the size 4. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill this array with the UI IDs of each one of those each one of our controls. So we're going to do slider ID, and we're going to say position 0, so the first slot in the array, and we're going to actually put this entire getUIID command over here. So whatever this returns, and this is happening on init, right? So the synth is going to load, or the instrument, it's not really a synth, right? It's going to load, and it's going to go through the init callback. It's going to declare this array, and then already it's going to put this UID into this slot of this array. And then if we simply use this variable later, we never need to worry about the command itself, but the getUID command. And I'll show how this comes into play. But for now, let's just fill in our array. So we know we have 4, and we know it's decay, sustain, and release. And of course, each UID gets its own slot. So now we have this array numbered 0 to 4. And if you say, hey, Mr. Array, at slot 2, what is the value that you have there? This would be the value, right? And that helps us. So let's go on and see how we then make use of this. Now we would like to kind of introduce looping through those IDs in order to set our different commands. So we will declare a variable that we're going to use in order to loop. This is a I always misspell declare. Like, doesn't matter how many years pass. So declare I. It's going to be a dynamic variable that we're going to be resetting and setting and using it for our looping. It's a very common thing in programming language and in Kontakt particularly. Kontakt has particular quirks with how it does the looping. Yeah, it's just the way it works in Kontakt. So in Kontakt, we use while loops. And the way to declare them, and even if you don't remember how, you can use the code completion, and it will already kind of fill in a while loop for me. And the condition would be, so well, wait. First, let's initialize I. Let's say that this variable that we declared, it starts with 0. So if we say I, at the moment this means 0, right? So if we say I, as long as it's under 4, because we have 4 elements here, so remember it's 0 base, so we can actually use the maximum. And we can say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll do inside for every slot of these arrays. So as long as I is under 4, we're going to do some stuff. And when we're finished, each time we make this pass, we raise I again. So the first time it's going to go through the loop, I is going to be 0. The second time I is going to be 1, 2, 3, and then it's going to be 4. Oops, the condition is no longer met. I is no longer smaller than 4. It actually equals 4 at this point, so it's no longer going to execute the code. It's going to finish and continue with whatever code it has after that. So we set up the while loop itself. And now we can just basically start doing what we need. So let's see. The first thing we want to do is set the picture. So we're going to do, as before, we're going to take this command. But now remember, we don't need to get the UID. We have the UID. So we're going to do slider ID. But instead of putting 0 here, we're going to put I here. Now, this is now exactly the exact same command. We can remove the rest. Because what's going to happen now? It's going to come in. Remember, I equals 0 at first. So slider ID at 0. Remember, that's the UID. It's already stored. So yeah, this guy's UID. Set the control par picture to knob. Go on with your loop. You raise I. Comes in again. It's still smaller than 4. Now it's slider ID at 1. So now it's actually this guy. Now do the same. For this guy, set the control par picture to knob. So we're good to go. So it's going to loop through and do it for all of them. The same, we're going to take this command now. We do it all in the loop. So it's as simple as doing this. We don't need the UI. Oops, just annoying copy paste, but we're going to put the mouse behavior in. And now we head to the automation ID. Now it starts to be a tiny bit more interesting because it's not exactly the same. The automation ID is different for each one of them. Let's see how that goes. So we're going to put the automation ID in there. And the automation ID, well, wait, it's kind of actually easy. Well, let's delete this. It's kind of actually easy for us because I, in our case, is exactly what we need. Because, yeah, it's 0, then it's going to be 1, then it's going to be 2, and then it's going to be 3. There might be cases, different instruments where this doesn't gel, but in our particular case, I mean, maybe use another variable, whatever. In this case, totally what we need, so automation ID can be I. And then comes an interesting part. Here, this we cannot do, right? Because it's completely like, not, yeah, it's dynamic. Every one of them is completely unique and different, so we cannot just infer something and loop through it. And we can do this a couple of ways. We can leave it like this. Maybe it's already fine. We saved a lot of lines of code, and everything that is makes sense to loop, we already looped. But we can do it also another way. We can still decide to loop through this. And let's do this because that's the example that we want to show. So again, maybe with 4 controls, like everything is overkill. We could have kept our original script. That would have been totally fine. But actually, you know what? Let's keep our original script so we can compare later. Hang on. So let's go here for a second, copy it. Let's compare when we're done. So let's just drop it here for a second. Cool, never mind. So we have it, the original one. So yeah, we can actually put also these in there. And the way to do it would be, let's introduce a new concept, which would be string arrays. So the same as we have, remember when I said that a $sign in the previous video, a $sign denotes an integer variable, a percentage sign denotes an integer array. We also have string arrays and string integers and yada yada. In this case, we need some way to store four different strings, which we could then reference the same way we reference this UI ID, right? So it's kind of the same flow. So we're going to declare a string array, which in Kontakt is an exclamation mark. Again, refer to the manual. And we're going to call it, I don't know, let's just call it automation names. And we know we need 4. Notice how this 4 is coming up over and over again, right? Maybe let's do something about that, but in a second. So we're going to declare the automation names, and it's exactly the same as this, right? So we're going to have to fill the different automation names in. So we're going to go to slot 0, and you know what? Let's prepare. So now we're doing 4, but if you're doing like 200, maybe it's easier to copy paste the whole thing and then fill it in. 3, 4, and we know what we need. So we know we need attack. We know we need decay. Oops, yeah, whatever. We know we need sustain, and we know we need release. Amazing. So now we have these automation names in this array. And now we can simply just the same, just go like, well, let's just take this. And let's do set control par. Remember, this we no longer need. Oh, well, this we no longer need either. I didn't do it in the last one. See, I had a mistake. Anyways, fix it now. So slider ID at I, slider ID every time, right? We go through the list. And now instead of giving this thing explicitly, we do slider ID. We have our string array, and we find out what is the value at I. So again, it comes in, let's say 0, I equals 0 now, so it expects here a UI ID, 0, we give it the UI ID 0, automation name is the command, we tell it, look, now go to this, no, sorry, wow, what did I do? It's not slider ID, it's automation names. And now, for this guy, you're taking the automation name at slot I, which is 0, which is attack. So let's kill all of this, and let's see what we got. So we go here, and we just see that everything is correct, right? So first of all, the picture is, we removed our previous code, so the picture is correct. I see the knob behavior is correct. Let's look at the automation. Whoa, one is not correct because, what did I do? Slider ID I, control par, automation names I, and, oh, yeah, look, there's the bug. It's kind of easy to find your bugs in the end. I mean, you cannot really destroy, it's just like scripting errors. So the error here was that I put the number 4. instead of the number 3. And yeah, and now it's all good. So we know that we did good with our looping, and look how many lines of code. So we have, I mean, I guess you could say that, look, for all this, yeah, and again, yeah, now it's a question of what do you prefer, because you did have to add this array, you did have to create this array. I mean, you're going to be using in other places anyways. You did have to create a while loop, but on the other hand, it's like super clean now. The command is just running through the loop, and if you add more controls, it's much easier to just add them in one. You just add the control in one place. The same, we could add the default values in there, but in our case, I mean, maybe it's not needed because we have a single one. Every time you're doing something, I would say more than once or twice, then it's time to think about, hey, maybe I put this in a loop. So, okay, but look, the same is also with our parent panel, actually. So we can continue with our logic. Well, wait, but first we need to declare the parent panel, or else it won't work. So we're going to declare the parent panel. I would actually say let's declare the parent panel right above everything. I think it makes the most sense. So let's move that over there. And then let's take, let's take the parent panel for the slider. Let's do the labels in a second. That's interesting as well. But let's finish with our sliders first. So we have, and you know what? I think I think parent panel should kind of go first. Preference, just my preference. So we're going to take the slider ID. And yeah, we're going to put it in the parent panel. I think that's good for us. Yeah, that should do the trick. So we can remove the panel stuff. Okay, now we have the labels as well, right? And as you notice, it's exactly kind of the same as the sliders. We can kind of put it in the loop as well. So I'm thinking, hey, let's just do that. But what we did here was we kind of put our slider IDs into this array here, over here. And now we have a choice. We can either kind of make like a whole, instead of calling it slider IDs, like, I don't know, call it UI IDs and have the sliders and then the labels, and then somehow kind of do some math in here. Or we can do a different thing. We can just declare label ID. Again, up to you. I'm showing you one of the ways. So I'm going to do label ID, and it's going to be exactly the same as this. And I'm purposely showing you here something that is not as efficient as it could be, and we're going to be solving that in the next video, but for now let's do it this way. So label, and we need one time to set the labels. Decay, also in the label ID, sustain, and release. So now, just the same as we have slider ID, we have label ID, and we can use it the exact same way. So the first thing we're going to do, and then here maybe, I mean, yeah, that's the thing, right? Should I put it here, or should I separate what I'm doing with my sliders and what I'm going to separate them a little. I think it's more readable for me, up to you. So I'm going to bring the labels here. It should be actually label ID at I. So we're no longer dealing with the slider ID array, we're dealing with the label ID, but it's the same loop, right? Because we need the same numbers in the loop. It's still going to be 0 to 4. Like, it's all good. We can just put it here. So label ID at I, we're going to do the parent panel. All good. We can remove the parent panel stuff. Cool. And then we have the set text stuff. And the thing is, set text, we cannot use explicitly set text because set text does not know how to work with looping. So set text always, remember I told you in set text you don't need to do the get UI ID? That's the catch. So you can put in the direct label widget name, but you cannot use it in looping. So there's no worries. We just use a different command. We use the same command. It's kind of similar to this one, where we do set control par label and all that, but it's just going to be a little bit different. So well, wait, let's do it under the panel. That's the whole point. We said panel first. So set control par str. We're still with the label IDs, all good. And now the control par, it's a bit confusing for text. For the sliders, I showed you it's the label of the slider. It's because the slider doesn't have like a text component. It has a label that goes into the DAW, but this is a text component, so the control par is actually called control par text. Again, all this is in the manual, and if you do it for a while, you get the hang of it. But for now, just suffice it to say, this is control par text, and the text we want to put in, this is actually kind of cool because we can actually reuse the automation names. But then it gets me to think maybe this is a bad name. So instead of automation names, let's call it, I don't know, control names. And you know what? Maybe that S isn't necessary. I don't know, control name. So we renamed the thingamajig, and we can use the same thing that we used for the automation name. It's also super relevant here. We can just do control name at I, and then we can remove all those set texts. One thing is, now we move this on top. So it's attempting to do stuff. Look at this, it's doing label ID, and it's saying, hey, get the UI ID of control par label. But the way Kontakt works is the script is parsed line by line, and there is no label, this thing is not declared yet. So we're gonna need to move it. And that's why it makes sense to group all your stuff. So let's say like all the declarations go first, and then you don't need to worry about, oh, wait a minute, is it declared yet actually? So that's kind of the more correct way to do it. So now let's just try it at this point. So let's save. So first of all, we have no errors, and we see that everything loads as we expected. So that kind of, it did save us a bunch of lines of code. We're doing the things in one place. As you saw, for example, we can even reuse, so we don't need to write attack, decay, sustain, release ever again, to be honest. Well, at least the strings. We don't need to write them again and again as we're working. We can change here as well. I'll show you in a bit in the next videos. But for this video, right, we have reusable, like the control names, all the stuff is reusable. And you know what? That's what we will do next. So in the next video, all this stuff, think about it, it's also kind of looping, right? If you notice, like, forget the panel for a second, but here, these are all the same. The Y values for the labels are all the same. The X values are super simple to do math on. It's just adding 44 for each one. So let's do that in the next video and condense our entire init callback into one while loop.